what I'm really excited about, our first dram, which is the new make spirit. It's not often that we get the opportunity to try new make spirits. And thankfully, this one has been brought down to 50%, I believe, not the crazy ABV of a lot of others. So yeah, as you pour that one out, I'd love to welcome anyone who hasn't met the wonderful Rod before. Introduce Rod Berry from Amber Lane Distillery, one of our favorite people in the industry. And I will get him to start us off kind of telling us who Amber Lane is and how they came about.
Thanks so much, Em. Look, it's fantastic to be at an event like this. And hello to everybody. I've met many of you at shows. A lot of people have been in contact with me directly, which is great. And thank you for those who've previously bought our whiskey. I'm really interested to know how many of you have tasted Amber Lane before. I suspect it's a large number, but maybe if you can just nod your head if it's a yes. So there's quite a few nodding, people nodding going on. So I'll just give you a bit of a background to Amber Lane. We established the distillery in 2018. We started producing our whiskey in September 2018. So we've just celebrated our 4th anniversary of making the new make. Quite different from many other distilleries in Australia, we chose to age our spirit in larger cask format. And that's quite deliberate. Smaller casks on the central coast of New South Wales would age very rapidly, and we wanted to slow down the maturation process and create a spirit that was a bit more complex. And we can explore all of that in a little while. But we're starting with a new make, so I should tell you a little bit about that to begin with. So like a lot of Australian distilleries, particularly in Tasmania, we actually outsource the production of our wash. We don't do any of the fermentation work ourselves. It's part of our philosophy that we want to have a very consistent product. Ultimately, we want to do our own fermentation, but at the moment, we use a local brewery on the central coast of New South Wales called Six String. I did some maths the other day, and I worked out that in total, we have bought the equivalent of 1.4 million schooners of beer from Six String over the last 4 years. And anyway, we get 6,000 litres a week. We have a particular recipe that they follow stringently. I won't tell you what the recipe is. It's one of our proprietary secrets, but we're very happy with it. It took us a few goes to come up with the recipe that we were happy with, but once we found it, we've stuck with it, and we've just finished our 89th run of 6,000 litres of wash. And from 6,000 litres, we produce about 700 litres of new make, and we collect our new make between. We collect the first 100 litres is the fours or the heads. We then come into the heart of the run. We collect about 700 litres. There are certain flavours that I'm looking for when I'm doing the run. And when I find those flavours, it's really a case of where do I want to draw the line. Sometimes it's a bit early. I draw it at 680. Sometimes I go as long as 720 or 730 litres. But there are particular flavours that I'm looking for. But if you're really focusing on what's before you with this new make, one of the flavours that people often pick up on is a Werther's original note. So it's a toffee note. And that flavour carries through all of our expressions. And we're very proud of it. It's a very delicious, approachable flavour. There's a lot of candy notes there, and also a really pronounced cereal note. And that's, again, something I'll talk about a bit later, but we are really, really interested in not crowding out the new make by the cask. We want the cask to contribute, but we don't want the cask to dominate and create really just whiskey cordial, which is unfortunately what happens when you use really small barrels and turbocharge the cask influence. So, you know, our product really stands on the quality of the new make. So I'm interested, Ollie, what are your thoughts? You're obviously giving it a go there.
So I think a couple of things before I give my thoughts. A quick question in the room. Does everyone know what new make spirit is? Is anyone trying new make spirit for the first time? Hands up if you have no idea what new make is. Paul, I think you know what new make is, mate.
It's vodka with potential. No, it's not.
The unofficial 30-second 101 version is you get your grain, in this case single malt barley, you turn it into a beer, you don't add the hops, you let it ferment, you distill it twice, this beautiful clear liquid comes out at new make. Rod, what ABV does it come out at your still, roughly?
The average, once we've collected the lot, it's about 67% ABV.
And then you pour it straight into your barrels and then let it mature, and that turns into whiskey officially in Australia after 2 years, but you mature it for a lot longer. But we're drinking today's new make. You just watered it down to be a little bit more palatable for everyone. It's not meant to be for shotting, it's just to kind of give you that distillery character. And I just wanted to highlight this is something, get used to this flavor, because I think Emma and Rod might ask you later on, can you try to discover that distillery character as we go throughout the tasting today? Is there some of those tasting notes that follow through? For me, it's super inviting. First of all, I'm getting some of that toffee, that caramel notes you mentioned before. For me, it's the sweetness and the mouthfeel. It's super viscous, it's oily, it's kind of coats your entire mouth. It's kind of a fun party in your mouth experience. That to me is kind of, this would go great, I think, in a cocktail ready to go. I'm loving it, Rod.
Thank you. When we were in Melbourne for the Melbourne show that you guys ran, the Boilermaker House loved it so much, they've bought some bottles. We actually had to create a label, which I'll show you, especially for them. We called it Pure Amber, and we just send them bottles of our new make, and they're experimenting with some cocktails. So anyone who's in Melbourne, you should head along to Boilermaker House and ask for a cocktail made from the Amber Lane Pure Amber and have a direct experience there.
I reckon they're probably there's a rum brand that either they don't make anymore or that you can't get in Australia called Ray and Nephew. There's this like super boozy white rum or whatever. I reckon they're probably going to try and make daiquiris with this, because it is like, I love that, like the multi toasty notes, David saying caramel toffee, Leo absolute caramel toffee as well. Justin's confused as to why we're not shotting this. But no, I love it. It's like graham crackers, but I agree with like Robin Kirsten that like pineapple lumps, like those lollies with the sugary. I'm not the biggest pineapple person, but it gives me those vibes. So
yeah,
it's very, very exciting.
I'm getting a little bit of a juicy fruit.
Wrigley's?
Yeah, Wrigley's vibes as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's really interesting as you provide some of those tasting notes, because these are the tasting notes that we get commonly when people are trying our whiskey. So those yummy flavors don't disappear. They're enhanced by other things that join them. But obviously a new make spirit is fainty. And one of the important things to be aware of, if you're not aware of how these things work, is that over the first year or two, the barrel is a porous item. It's breathing. There's oxidation going on, and the most offensive components to the new make, the most volatile, are breaking down or dissipating from the cask. And so this will change over time, and those parts of it which are a bit more of a battle for your palate will calm down, and hopefully the more delicious notes will become increasingly pronounced.
Yeah, cool. Now I know Ollie said it with what ABV you fill your barrels at. Do you bring the ABV down? Because not every distiller takes it off the still and puts it straight in a barrel. I know some of the Scottish distilleries end up with like 70% new mix. That would be a bit gangbusters. Do you order
Yeah, we do.
ABV before it goes in a barrel?
Yeah, we do. So some people have described our whiskey as quite Scottish in style. And it may be that we follow some of the Scottish traditions. One thing that so in Scotland, it's generally brought down to 63.5. That's the kind of industry standard. Obviously, people play around with slight differences, but 63.5 is pretty much bang on for Scotland. Because of the slightly warmer conditions and the greater diurnal ranges in temperature, etc., we decided to go down to 62. So it's basically 62, 61.5, 62 is our fill. And so we add some rainwater to our spirit for the barrel filling. And when Ollie said we fill straight away, that's exactly what we like to do. We like to fill the barrels while the new make is still warm. We think that creates a lovely initial drawing from the cask, the flavours from the cask. I might just mention that we've done studies to see how much flavour is actually in those barrels. A virgin oak, American oak cask weighs about 40 kilos. One that we received from the bourbon distillers, which may have held bourbon for 6 or 8 years, that will weigh 50 to 55 kilos, which means that you've got 10 to 15 kilograms of bourbon soaked into those staves, and you want to access them. And so putting in some new make while it's warm is magnificent. It immediately starts to extract. And we had some people at the distillery last Friday when we were filling some casks, and I got them to stand over the funnel so that they could smell the new make going in, and the drawing of the smell, the bourbon aromas from the barrel coming up, and the interplay between those aromas was fantastic.
Yeah, awesome. Well, Hugh's got a question. Do you find that something like adjusting ABV to match casks is perhaps something, it's not something I've necessarily heard of, but is it something that you've kind of seen or heard about or experimented with, like having a higher ABV for ex-bourbon and a lower ABV for ex-wine?
I have heard that different distillers do experiment with different strengths. And I know, for example, at one stage, I don't know if they still do it, but Starwood was filling at 55%, for example. We certainly, when we do a second fill, we would change the strength of the ABV, because otherwise you're just drawing from the same kind of level. And bear in mind that ethanol has extractive qualities. So we're talking about a combination of water and ethanol. Some parts in the barrel, they break down in water, they're water soluble. Other parts need the ethanol to break them down. And the ratio you have between the ethanol and the water will impact what you draw and what you don't draw. But pretty much for us, we stick with the 62, 61.5. And then for the second fill, we're playing around at about 55.
Yeah. Cool. Fair enough. All right. Well, maybe we should get on to some actual whiskey. Yeah. I will say, from the deepest part of my heart, I love new make spirit. It's always such an interesting thing to see. Once it comes off the still, it's like, well, you don't know where you're sending it. You don't know where it's going to go. And I love that, that newness and that exciting, I truly believe vodka is just whiskey with wasted potential. But yeah, let's get on to our second dram, the Destiny.
Brilliant.
So I will say as well, the names on these, when I first heard about your whiskeys, I was like, oh, that's so interesting. It's not, it's going kind of against the norm of this is our ex-bourbon, this is our ex-sherry, and I think that's very exciting. So I would love to learn a little bit more about where the names came from. And I believe as well, this was your first launch?
This was our first release. And there's actually a special connection with the Whisky List, because we chose to reach out to the Whisky List first to help with the promotion of our brand. And so the very first time there was a public tasting, it was a launch event for us on the 22nd of April, was with the Whisky List at Crow's Nest. And it was just wonderful. And it started a fantastic relationship with the Whisky List. So why Destiny? Well, there was a sense of destiny about launching this distillery. I had someone at one of the shows say that the names of our whiskeys sound like strippers, or prostitutes or something. I don't know whether they'd had a bit too much to drink. It was in the last hour of the show. But anyway, Destiny it's all about bringing together the best of the sherry casks and the bourbon casks. So whereas a lot of distilleries, as you say, are releasing the bourbon expression or the sherry expression, my heritage is drinking lots of Scotch whiskey, where, of course, the distillers have spent a lot of time and effort blending different casks. And in particular, a traditional methodology in Scotland is to bring together the bourbon and the sherry. The vast majority of whiskey in the world, of course, is aged in ex-bourbon casks. It used to be more sherry casks that were favourable, but over time, Scotland has developed the tradition of a largely bourbon expression with some sherry cask influence. And that's what we're doing with Destiny. It's roughly 3 parts bourbon cask, 2 parts sherry cask. And it's our first attempt at trying to create a really lovely balanced dram. It's bottled at 50.6%. Initially, my intention was to bottle it a bit stronger than that. 53% was what I planned. But these things have a way of choosing for themselves. I'm a big believer in the alchemy. I might have an idea about how it should turn out, but ultimately you've got to listen to what the spirit is saying and let it be what it wants to be. And as I was adding water slowly to this, I came to a point at 50.6, and I felt that was the right strength for this release. So it's a bit stronger than a lot of other whiskies that would be in the core range. I'm a lover of cask strength whiskey, and you'll see that as we go on to some of the other expressions. But, you know, I like something with a bit of body to it. And this one is lovely and rich, and it speaks both to the sherry and the bourbon. And hopefully you'll find as you try it that neither dominates. That was what I was striving for. I wanted a dram that was balanced. And I think a lot of whiskies are a bit one-dimensional. They just showcase one flavour, and that's great if you like that flavour. But if a whiskey has more going on, if it's more complex, if there's more flavours balancing with each other, it's more of a journey of exploration. And you pour that dram and you can sit with it for an hour or two and pick up different things as you go along. And I really wanted that for my whiskey, for my first expression.
Yeah, nice. I love the tasting notes coming in, and please add tasting notes or questions as you come. I love seeing what other people are tasting. Barrel Brothers say it's a caramel bomb with apricots. Love that note. Hugh's getting a strange musk lolly note to it, or strangely getting a musk lolly note. I am fully behind that. It's very like if you've ever had Persian berry floss, it's like a little bit more dynamic than regular fairy floss. But I definitely get a lot of Persian fairy floss off of this dram. It's that really nice, like sweet and fruity.
Is that the rose water element to the floss?
I don't know, because you can get you can get like pistachio Persian fairy floss as well. I don't know. I haven't been to a Turkish or Lebanese store in a while to pick some up.
Rod, can you hold up that very fancy nosing glass you just have?
Oh, sure.
What is that?
Fabulous. Is that like a brandy cognac cup?
It's known as a blending glass, and it was sort of a 1920s style of blending glass. And so it was the favoured style of glass if you were bringing together different elements, as we do with Amber Lane. To give you an idea of how I go about things, I'm constantly at the distillery, I'm collecting samples from barrels. So these are some recent samples. And there's so much aroma at the distillery that it's hopeless trying to do my blending there. So I will take these samples home with me. I've always got with me a 5 ml plastic syringe and a 1 ml plastic syringe. And what I'm doing when I'm blending, I'm using a glass like this where it really emphasizes the nose, and I can really pick up those notes very clearly. I'll be adjusting with 3 mils of this and 5 mils from that. So if I'm putting out a blended expression, I'm working very hard over a number of weeks to come to the right balance between those flavors.
Very
question.
cool. I love that.
I got a question for you, Rod, on the topic of blending. So from looking at what the market's done, so most Aussie distillers, they'll launch something out, within 2 years. They go smaller liquid, liter casks, 20, 30 liters, 50 liters. You've gone for big, as you've mentioned, 200 plus, and you've released a blend as your first whiskey in the market.
Mm-hmm.
Was this pure happenstance? Is this part of part of your philosophy of what you believe in? Like you've gone a little bit against the grain what the traditional Aussie distillers have done for, they normally go, here's our first 10 casks that we put down in order of release. Like, yeah, where's I personally find blending a lot harder to achieve. You could have, not everyone has the nose to do it. Women have better noses than men generally, but yeah, you've gone straight into the blending route, which is, I think, an exceptional credit to you. But yeah, where's the inspiration behind that?
Well as loving whiskey, I love cognac and other forms of brandy. And of course, they are all blended. The spirit doesn't stay in the one cask during its maturation. It moves from cask to cask over its life. And then ultimately, what is released is a blend of a number of casks. I wanted to mention, for those that want to learn a bit more about blending, this book here. There are very few books in the English language which teach us about blending. It's not really something spoken about in the training that I've done. No one really explained to me how to blend, but the tradition of blending is very rich and long in Europe, Central Europe, and particularly with cognac. So this book is by Hubert Germain Robin, who's seventh generation cognac maker, who's actually moved to California in the last 15 or 20 years, and he's producing amazing brandy in America. And he unlocks a lot of the secrets to blending and the process that we go through. And it's just fascinating. But there are rules such as you need to make sure that the two liquids that you're bringing together are the same temperature. If you don't, you'll get a shock reaction. You should be bringing them together slowly. There is some cognac makers would only bring down the ABV by 1% per annum. I mean, I don't have the time to do that, but certainly I can add a little bit of water each fortnight to a cask and bring it down slowly over a number of months. So that's what we try and do as an example. But as for bringing together the flavors, I love cooking. I experiment a lot in the kitchen. Every time I make a bolognese, the recipe is a bit different. I think it's just an expression of my personality. I like to try doing things a bit differently. And I think that single casks can be wonderful if they are wonderful. But the truth is, in every distillery, most barrels are okay, but not exceptional. And something happens when you bring together a sherry and a bourbon cask expression. Somehow the combined result is greater than the sum of the parts. I don't know what the mystical alchemy is, but it's a bit like if you're cooking Brussels sprouts. If you just cook in a bit of butter, it just lifts, or throw in a bit of bacon, it just transforms that vegetable. And in the same way, I just think something magical happens. And as we were waiting all this time to release, we had a lot of fun in the distillery taking samples from casks and mixing them together. And I remember a few occasions when the 6-string brewery guys, they came over and we were tasting a few different expressions, and we together we were just mixing things together and seeing what happened. And that's where the idea of the destiny came up, that these two casks were destined to be together.
Yeah, awesome. That's really cool. I do think, given Justin's comment, quite a few people are now looking up that book. I know I Depository Googled it myself to add to my collection. But that's really, really, I think it's so cool. It's so interesting. And I think, obviously we being whiskey lovers, we don't really think about cognac and armagnac and brandy that much. And I hope we do. I just had an interview and they're like, what do you think will be the next big thing? I'm like, I hope it will be, Cognac and Armagnac. But that's so exciting. And I will forgive you for traumatizing me with the Brussels sprouts comment.
Yeah.
I'm sure most people can empathize that they've had some very awful Brussels sprouts in their life. But yeah, shall we move on to the liquid amber? So now there's a lot more sherry casking in this one. And as you guys pour it out, I just want to say the maple syrup notes on the last whiskey from Leo and David, spot on, so good. All right. We'll see if we can flash the book cover again. Maybe
yes, sure. Yeah.
Share that up on the screen and send him the deets, because I am the bad at the technology.
The maturation of distilled spirits, vision and patience.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. There's actually another book he wrote later. So there's two, it's sort of a two-part series, but I found them on Book Depository. So you should be able to find them fairly easily.
I will say Book Depository has some like really great little odd stuff as well. I think I've got a book somewhere which was like it was published in the late 1800s, and it's literally just photocopies of each of the pages, and it talks about the short history of the maturation of sherry and port or whatever. It's very cool. I'll have to bring it to show you sometime, Rod. But yeah, tell us a bit more about the liquid amber. I know that this has some sherry cask from Fernando de Castilla, which if you haven't heard of the Spanish bodega before, it is probably one of the most well-renowned bodegas in the world for fortified wines. But yeah, tell us a bit more about how this one came about.
So the first thing to tell you is that if you drive up the driveway to our distillery, there is a line of liquid amber trees on either side. So you come into the property, and every time I arrive, I'm driving through liquid amber trees. And obviously in autumn, you get the beautiful colours of the liquid amber. I mean, liquid amber is actually a pest. It's not a native species at all, but anyway, it has lovely colours, which really brought to mind this. So it's 5 parts sherry cask to 1 part bourbon in round numbers. I always say in round numbers. It's a lot more precise than that, but broadly speaking, 5 parts sherry and 1 part bourbon cask. So obviously we are trying to showcase in this vatting the sherry notes. And you're quite right, Em. A portion of the sherry cask that's gone into this is a Pedro Ximenez cask from Fernando de Castilla. So I'm going to be there in a couple of weeks. I'm quite excited. I'm heading off next week on a barrel maturation research trip for 3 weeks. I'm going to completely nerd out on all things barrels, spending a week in Cognac, catching up with some people I know there, and then down to Bordeaux, where I'll be hosted by the cooperage Sylvain, which makes some of the best French oak casks in the world. And part of my time there, I'll be going to Sauterne, to Chateau d'Yquem, for those that know the finest of Sauternes in the world. And then I'm heading down to Jerez in Spain, where I will be meeting with the good folks from Fernando de Castilla. So I'm very excited to be going there. But anyway, we're very lucky. There are 2 distilleries in the world at the moment who are able to secure large volumes of casks from Fernando de Castilla. They are Brooklady and Amber Lane. How it is that we've managed to secure over 110 barrels so far from them, I don't know. They seem to like us and we like them, so it's working very well. So we're using Pedro Ximenez and Oloroso sherry casks. So this has the PX influence. It also has some Australian Apera. So for those that don't know, Australian sherry after 2010 by law was renamed Apera, which is short for aperitif. And so we can't use the name sherry for Australian sherry. So it has some of that in it. So it's ex-McWilliams cask, 300-litre cask, and Fernando de Castilla ex-PX cask in it, and some bourbon. I should say the bourbon casks that we use, all of them come from Heaven Hill. One of my research projects when I started the distillery was to try every bourbon I could get my hand on. So I had quite an extensive bourbon collection. I have to confess that I've consumed most of it. I love bourbon, but I ended up deciding that I really liked Elijah Craig bourbon, small batch, bottled at 47% ABV. Just a lovely, very delicious dram. So all of our bourbon casks are from Heaven Hill, every single one from the very first day.
Yeah,
so in
nice.
terms of the flavour profile, very keen to hear what other people think about that.
Yeah, we've got the theme seems to be nuts and cherries. So you've got Ryan with maple cherry, nutty on the nose. Barrel Brothers saying maple syrup again, that nutty dark cherry ripe, like that homemade cherry ripe slice deliciousness. Justin saying, you've got tough research gigs. I mean, look, it's going to be a struggle, I'm sure. There's going to be awful photos that you have to share to make sure that, the government knows it was for work.
You're going to hate it. If you follow my Instagram account, you're going to be so cranky with me.
I'm already dreading seeing it. Yeah, and so it's just kind of the Jerez region of Spain and stuff you're mostly going to.
Yeah, that's right. So the Sherry Triangle, there are 3 villages that make up the Sherry Triangle. I'll be based in Jerez de la Frontera, which is the main heart of the Sherry region, and then going on day trips to the other 2 areas, San Luca, and I'm trying to think of the name of the third, but anyway, one of them produces the Manzanilla. Fernando de Castilla do all of them. Just for those that don't know, sherry is matured at different strengths, different ABVs, and the ABV largely dictates what the end product will be. If the ABV is below about 17% as the sherry matures, it develops a bacteria inside the barrel known as a flor, not FLAW, but FLOR. So it's a type of fungus which interacts with the liquid and produces or creates some of the flavour in the sherry. But when you get above about 70% ABV, it's too strong for that fungus to survive. And it's above that strength that we get Oloroso, and then the strongest is the Pedro Ximenez. And so they don't have the interaction of the flor. But and so to make the sherry, you have wine, obviously, but also you add to that distilled wine, and that creates that higher ABV that produces the sherry.
Yeah, I think it was a while ago. I think I wrote a bit of a breakdown on sherry, which is up on the Whisky List website as well, which kind of breaks down like the different styles, Manzanilla, Fino, all those kinds of different things. As well as Cognac, get into sherry. Everyone should get into sherry. I think it's probably one of the most exciting spirits or drinks out there. Hugh's got a question. Do you do anything to prep the casks? Do you fill them wet? Do you fill them dry? Do you rechar them? How do you treat your casks before you pop that spirit in?
So we have them recharred lightly. We don't get carried away, but we do get them recharred. The sherry casks are brought to Australia wet, so they have about 5 litres of sherry in them. The sherry they put in them for transportation is not old sherry. The casks are all at least 30 years old, but for transportation purposes, it's younger sherry. And so it arrives at the cooperage in South Australia wet. They lightly char it and then they deliver it straight to us. In terms of what we do, we always add water to the cask first. And one of the reasons we do that is to check for any leaks. And by adding water, the staves of the barrels swell, and generally it removes any leaks that might exist. These casks from Spain, they're so old that they're very curious. I mean, every one is different. The shapes are all unique. They're like snowflakes. No one is the same. We had one situation where it kept leaking on one side after we'd filled it, and we ended up with 3 bung holes. So we thought it's easier just to drill a hole and put a bung into these. And so it was, I don't know, it was quite a comical situation.
Like a leaky ship.
yeah, that's right. But what we actually discovered in doing this was that on one side, the stave would have only been about 5 mils thick, like really, really, really thin. And on the other side, the stave was maybe an inch thick in the same barrel. So quite bizarre. Anyway, if there are leaks that we perceive in the casks, we use beeswax to seal them. That's a bit of old-fashioned technology that works brilliantly. And so we literally get some beeswax on a spoon and we heat it up. Careful to not be close to any flammable liquid, I hasten to say, and deal with those leaks. But some of them will develop a leak over summer or in the winter. Like you got to watch the barrels. My business partner Phil inspects the barrels every day for leaks, and quite frequently he'll come across a barrel that is weeping, and we need to get the beeswax out and sort it out. Anyway, it's a lovely process, but every barrel is different, and you treat them like your children in a way. You just got to check in on them every day.
Yeah, I think that's something really special you find at Australian distilleries. I know the Scottish distillery that didn't realize one of its barrels was leaking for 7 years. The most they got was like 100 bottles out of this huge hogshead. But yeah, awesome. I love the notes, honey and vanilla. Vanilla seems to be the vibe as well. Lengthy vanilla and dates notes as Paul. Leo, that honey and vanilla on the nose with that chocolate coated raisins on the finish. The long finish is wonderful. Barrel Brothers are thinking jam donuts, which, oh my God, go to your local fish and chip shop, get some jam donuts and drink and eat them with this. That would be amazing. Owen seconds that. Well, shall we move on to a very exciting and brand newish release, the Silk Road.
Yeah. So we've gone all out with this one. We absolutely love this expression. So if I can return to the subject of cognac production. So there's a bit of a preamble here, but we should pour the dram and let it open up in the glass as we're talking. In the production of cognac, the eau de vie, which is what they call the distilled wine, is placed in a virgin oak cask originally for 6 to 12 months, and then it is moved to older barrels. And if you were to taste the eau de vie after 12 months, you would find that it was just dreadfully oaky and tanniny. It would not be a pleasing product. But over many hundreds of years, the cognaciers have discovered that over time in an older, more inert cask, that those oaks and tannins will break down, but you are left with the rich mouthfeel and spiciness of the virgin cask. And so what we've been able to do with this expression, Silk Road, is follow the cognac style of maturation. This was placed into a virgin American oak cask for a year. And so it was absolutely ripping with oak and tannin, and it was quite unpalatable when we tasted it after 12 months. And we're like, what the hell have we done? It was barrel 13, actually. Ironically, it was like, oh my God, it's the number 13 curse. So we moved it to an old bourbon cask and left it there for several years. And a few months ago, we had a tasting panel. We invited a number of people who we considered to be at the top of their game as whiskey nerds, I suppose. And we said, come to the Oak Barrel, let's go through and taste some samples. So we blind tasted 10 samples, and they were samples just taken randomly from different casks. And this was one of the ones that we put before them, and it was the dead set winner of the day. People just absolutely loved it. And I think it's because of this different treatment. It's had the benefit of the virgin oak cask. It's then been put into an older bourbon cask. It is the closest thing that you'd ever get to bourbon made out of malted barley in Australia. It's very moreish. We've bottled it at cask strength, 59.8%. It lost a couple of ABV by virtue of moving it to another barrel and adding some water to that cask to prepare it for the spirit. So I think it was sitting at about 61, 60 and a half or so. We moved it into that other cask, dropped it down to just below 60% ABV. Anyway, we're very, very happy with it. It's been the fastest seller of anything we've put out to the market, and we're very happy with it.
Yeah, cool, nice. So again, ex-Heaven Hill bourbon casks and such. Yep. What kind of brought the name for this one, Silk Road? Obviously, the next whiskey is what I'm affectionately calling the Laneway series.
Yep.
But yeah, so Silk Road obviously has a bit of meaning behind it as well.
Yeah, it does. So I'm a bit of a history buff. I've had a few careers. My first career was a history teacher, and I used to teach about the Silk Road. And then I was a lawyer for 20 years. Forgive me, but I was. And then I came into the whiskey world. But the Silk Road was an historic phenomenon over 3,000 years. It represented the trade routes between the East and the West. And obviously spices were one of those prized things that were traded and were worth a lot of money in those days. They were grown in the East, and you couldn't grow many of the spices in the West. It was too cold. And so there's that lovely spicy note that as soon as I tasted this, I thought of the Spice Islands. But then secondly, the Silk Road represented an exchange of cultural ideas between the East and the West. So all sorts of technology spread via the Silk Roads. For example, gunpowder, knowledge about gunpowder, even the use of barrels. The barrels were used by the Chinese for many centuries before it came to the West. And barrels were used for the transportation of rice, gunpowder, and all sorts of other things. But one of the things that I wanted to really lean on was this idea that we in Australia are using an idea that we've got from France. We're following a Cognac style of maturation. So we're in a global village now, and we can apply ideas that we find in other places around the world, and hence the Silk Road.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Well, we've got some amazing comments and tasting notes. Justin saying that this one's probably up there for Aussie Whiskey of the Year in his honest opinion. And I know that he's working at a distillery, and I will not be telling your boss you think that the whiskey is better. Barrel Brothers, this isn't a tasting note, obviously. They're just saying these drams keep getting better. Caramel vanilla tangerine is a great pick, Paul. That not quite stone fruit, not quite citrus tangerine thing. Leo, rosewater on the nose, Turkish delight. Everyone's real into it. Mike says it's the best so far. He thinks it's tasty. And Leo agrees, could be Aussie Whiskey of the Year. Doesn't drink 59.6%, says Jose. Dangerous in a good way. David, the sweet fig nose. I fully get that. If you've ever had those Greek dried figs or Turkish dried figs, I don't know where they come from. I just know the family I get them from is Greek. But that sugary, sticky sweetness, so good. Ryan, hell yeah, Silk Road. Orange peel oak, toasted almonds, cinnamon, super good. Everyone's really loving it. I mean, obviously that panel, that general consensus from the panel,
I think it stood out because it actually was quite different. I think for me there is a really strong orange actually mandarin is where what I would center. And I remember there was a group of us at the Melbourne Whisky Show who tasted this. I think Em, you were at the table with me when we were tasting it, and it was like, what fruit do you taste? And we all
said mandarin. I think Yao and I were sitting next to each other. We're like, mandarin for sure.
Yeah.
Rod, can I just say, So you launched your first whiskey in April this year.
Yeah.
This is your third or your fourth whiskey this year?
This is number 5.
Number 5. All right, you've peaked. You've retired. Time for another career change, mate. Wow.
Yeah, we have. You've seen nothing yet. I mean, some of our individual casks. So, barrel 003, which is a 200-liter bourbon cask, is next level, as is 008, and we're just sitting on them. 007 we used for Noble Lane, which I'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah. I think that's
can I just highlight, I don't, there's been a few, but not many Australian distilleries have played with virgin oak or have done like a second, maturation to it or a finishing, as you can say. The closest thing this reminds me of is actually the World Whisky Award winner from Cavalan, who did they did a virgin oak and finished in a Vino Barrique, I think, from memory. You need to double check my notes, but mate, I agree with earlier comments from in terms of dangerously drinkable. It's 59.6% ABV and it drinks like high 40s or something. It's just super moreish. There's no heat on it. It's just sweet spice. I don't know. There's balance. It tells a story though. Well done.
Thank you very much. One of the things that we're going to be exploring while we're in Bordeaux in a couple of weeks is doing the same kind of thing, but with the virgin French oak. So I want to do a similar thing. I'm very conscious that sherry is a stronger flavour than bourbon in terms of using a refill of such a cask. So I don't know how it's going to pan out, but we're filling 2 300-litre virgin French oaks this side of Christmas, and then we'll move them into the oldest sherry casks that we've got and see if we can reproduce something like this, but with the French oak. So watch this space. It'll be a couple of years before, obviously, you see the outcome of that effort. But I'm really excited to be researching new techniques and trying new things. And I've said this a couple of times tonight. I really believe that simply leaving the spirit in one barrel and then bottling it doesn't necessarily. Occasionally there are casks which are fabulous, so I don't want to say never do it, but I think by and large you'll get a more complex and interesting dram if you are a bit more flexible in your attitude to the use of casks and you're prepared to move things around and see what different influences and layers you can create in your whiskey.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear how your trip to Chateau Cam goes as well, because I think that technique with a Sauternes as the older secondary cask would just, I would sign up for a case. Sight unseen, I'd want a case. But
I don't know if I've got much chance of getting some barrels from Chateau de Cam, but I'm going to give it my best.
Say, oh, well, Jim McEwen said it was fine. Or, just like drop some names and be like, gimme.
Yeah.
But yeah, so love everyone's comments. Sally, sometimes virgin oak means over spicy and pungent, but this Silk Road plays really well. I agree. Sometimes virgin oak can have like really dry, cloying, spicy, green, sappy notes, but this like 2 casking kind of situation makes it really, really good. And yeah, Justin, virgin oak's horrendously underrated, and obviously hard because we have to fight the Americans for it. They're constantly going through virgin oak barrels.
Yeah.
But shall we, speaking of Sauternes, actually kind of a nice little segue into our 5th dram. So the number 1, Noble Lane. So
Brilliant.
pour this one out and tell us a bit about the lane ways and the.
Yeah, there's not much of this left. I dread to tell you. I think there's maybe only 4 or 5 cases left in the. So let me just explain that the label is intended to be like a street sign, and pointing us in different directions. Right, we're going down different paths. Obviously, the overall name Amber Lane. We're going on a journey, the Amber journey down a lane. But what we decided early on was that when we put out a single cask expression, that generally, if it's going to be an expression that we repeat, the first expression will be number one. So this is number one Noble Lane. And so at some point there'll be a number two Noble Lane, and it's as if you're traveling down this street, trying all the different houses, as it were. We're hoping that some people might say, "Oh, I would like to own the whole street," and fanatically buy every bottle. So there's a bit of marketing thought behind it. But so this is number one Noble Lane. It's the lane we go down when we are playing around with the Noble Rot, which is Botrytis Semillon. So what we've done here is we've aged this in an ex-bourbon barrel from Heaven Hill, 200-litre bourbon, cask 007 for 3 years. And then we put it into a Botrytis Semillon cask for 7 months to finish it. Once again, it's a single cask expression, bottled at cask strength, 59.8%.
I feel like that meme of "I was today years old when I realized," now that you pointed out the label and the street signs. I feel so dumb. But I love that. This is super, super cool. So obviously, Botrytis Semillon is, so for those who aren't super familiar with sweet wines, we're not big sugar sweet wine fiends like me and my husband are. Botrytis is a type of, I believe it's a fungus or something like that.
Yeah, it's known as the Noble Rot. So in Bordeaux, where they make Sauterne, what happens is it's a particular area where a mist comes over the vineyards in the morning and covers all of the grapes, and then it dissipates in the afternoon, but it just keeps the grapes really moist and encourages the growth of the fungus. And over many hundreds of years, the French wine growers came to understand that if you let the fungus go and grow on these grapes, you didn't pick them, but you just let them shrivel up on the vine, as it were. They moved on from the usual grape notes to these gorgeously rich, juicy sultana, raisiny notes. And Chateau d'Yquem is the most famous producer of this style of wine. Remarkably, it gets better in the bottle up to 100 years from the time that it's bottled. I remember I've only had it once in my life. I went to a restaurant in Crow's Nest in Sydney called Stuyvesant House, where the rather eccentric Rudy told me that he had some of this. It was $2,500 for the bottle. And I wasn't the one that ordered it. Another person ordered at the table, and I was very happy to put my hand up and say, "Yes, please, I'll have some of that." It is the most delicious, rich dessert wine. The closest equivalent in Australia is Noble One, which is a De Bortoli product, but there's lots of other producers of this style of wine in Australia. So it's a dessert style of wine, sticky, sweet, juicy. And what we have found is that it partners very well with our bourbon casks. It lifts the flavors of the bourbon cask to another level. And the richness and the flavor of this is just, well, I think it's wonderful. And one thing I've noticed in particular, our market research indicated to us that whereas once upon a time, the largest cohort of people drinking whiskey were 65 and older men, the largest group now who consume brown spirits, including whiskey, are 25 to 34-year-old men and women. It's a very different market. And that market wants to engage with something that is just intrinsically delicious. It's not, you don't want to have to work hard to fall in love with with whiskey. You want something that's approachable and insanely sweet and moreish. And this is it. This is the sort of thing that you could have with ice cream. It's just so yum.
That sounds like a real good time. Love the notes, Paul. Buttery and nutty, lovely long finish. My favorite so far. I feel like with every whiskey we try, it's like, no, this one's my favorite now. Now this one's my favorite. They're all each topping the last. It's been fantastic. Yep. Ryan brown sugar on the nose, great call. Mike's saying there's a definite Amber Lane signature in all of these whiskies. I'm not quite sure it is, but it's there. What do you think, flavor wise for you, Rod, is the signature flavor you find through all your whiskies?
Well, I've described this to many people at the shows as like drinking a vanilla cake. So the vanilla notes are just amplified, and the butteriness as well. A really well-made Sauterne has a buttery note to it, and I think that really is picked up in this dram.
Yeah, nice. The guys from Barrel Brother podcast, from a bourbon lover, it's their favorite. Leah's saying it's got quite a dry finish. I think that like that time between the bourbon cask and the botrytis Semillon cask really like softens the pure diabetes note that you can sometimes get with with those sticky sweet fortified wines.
Can I just say, for those that find it a little bit dry, just add a few drops of water. I think this is one that really does respond very well to a few drops. It just softens it a little bit. I tend to, if I'm enjoying the flavour of a whiskey at cask strength, I will tend to bottle it as it is. I think there's an authenticity about doing it that way. Some people have said to me, Rod, you should add a bit of water to it to bring it to the ABV that you think the consumer should be drinking it at. And I would rather not I'd rather not patronize the consumer by assuming for them how they want it. And I found at the shows that an equal number of people like it neat, with an equal number of people who like it with a few drops of water. So this way you can choose.
Yeah, I agree. It's that ultimate, you can't take the water out once you add it, it gives people options for drinking. Yeah. I'm obviously a massive cask strength whiskey fan. I'm very much, I think I've tried 80% ABV New Mix before, so it's not outside my wheelhouse. But yeah, as David was saying, 100% you can't uncook a steak or add back alcohol. Oh, awesome! Ollie's got us some photos from the trip and the tour that I was unfortunately not there for. But yep. I will be cashing in my must visit card when I'm next up that way. But yeah, maybe Rod, did you want to tell us a little bit about what we're looking at? Because obviously it's
sure. So this is our still, the Mary Rose. It's a 3,600 litre still. We originally planned on something quite a bit smaller, but then we did the maths and we realised that for the same effort we might as well go big, go hard. It's a beautiful piece of kit. It was made for us by Mark Burns, who is, I think, the premium still manufacturer in Australia. He's based in Griffith in country New South Wales, and he has his own distillery as well, the Ailing Distillery. And I think that's one of the secrets, is that he understands as a distiller what is required. And basically I said to him, I drew a picture of the still shape that I wanted. It was loosely based on the shape of the Springbank stills. Springbank is one of my favourite distilleries, and so he was happy to oblige. It was the biggest still he'd made at that time. You'll notice that it has a lantern neck, and that is intended to encourage reflux. So the distillate will recondense and fall back down into the pot to maximize the copper contact, and it slows it down. So in a sense, we are trying to inhibit the distillation process to get as much copper contact as possible. We spend an enormous amount of time between runs cleaning the inside of the still, because we really want that copper contact. We don't want any impurities coating the insides of the still to get in the way of that process.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Who on this? I was just going to ask who's been on a distillery tour. Hands up if anyone's been lucky. Paul again, mate. Justin, no. Get out, guys. Come on. For those who haven't, highly recommend any distillery. But if you do get a chance, they're just it's an hour and a half's drive north of Sydney, up on the way to Gosford. Hit up, it's appointments only, so don't just turn up any day of the week, otherwise Rod's not going to be there. But Rod, you're doing distillery tours or any sort of that sort of stuff, or I just invited everyone around accidentally?
Yeah, it's you're going to do the tour, are you, Ollie? Look, we're very happy for people to approach us and to arrange visits. So we had last Friday we had Jeremy Patterson, who runs Whiskify, and a couple of his mates. We had a bloke that came to a tasting a couple of weeks ago, Jeff, who's a wine lover, but he fell in love with the whiskey and he's become a member of our membership club. And we also had another bloke, a lovely young bloke, Alex, who we met at a show in Sydney, who's only 21, and he claims that he only drinks cask strength whiskey, which is remarkable for that age. I hate to think what he'll be drinking when he's my age. So we had a group of 6, and they actually helped me fill the barrels. They were tasting the spirit coming off the still. They had a lovely time. And I think often when you visit a distillery, it's one thing to taste the whiskey and to learn a bit from these sorts of sessions. But often when you actually go to a distillery and see things happening before you, you just learn a lot more about the nuts and bolts of what's involved. And I think getting a bit of an appreciation of the amount of love and care that goes into production. Whiskey is just so much different in its production to, say, gin or vodka, because there's so much love and effort put into the maturation. And it's actually the maturation that I love. That's the thing that really floats my boat. We've designed the still, we've designed the mash bill. We know where we take the cuts. So it's all fairly well systematized now, but when you look at the barrels, it's just every barrel is different. And I'm taking samples all the time, and I'm just constantly watching these and making notes for each cask. That's where the action seems to be.
Yeah, cool. Well, Hugh's come in with a great question. As you can see in the photo, you got a relatively horizontal, maybe slight incline upwards line arm. Was that, obviously intentional? The angle of the line arm makes a huge difference for the spirit.
It does. So, if you tour Scotland, you'll know that line arms are all sorts of different angles. The higher the angle, so the steeper it is, the harder it is for the spirit to get through. And so you'll tend to produce a lighter spirit. Whereas if you were to go to some of the heavier styles, if you went to Lagavulin, the still itself is like a pear shape, and then the neck just funnels straight down at a sort of an angle like that. We decided that we wanted to, we didn't want to just collect everything. We wanted to make it a little bit difficult for the distillate to get across, but we didn't want to make it so hard that we ended up with a really light floral style. We wanted a bit more oiliness and body to our spirits. So you might say we took the middle ground and we went with a horizontal line arm. Anyway, we're really happy with how it's turned out. A lot of these things are just happenstance, and it's worked for us.
Yeah, fantastic.
Well, I think a few more photos to share.
Well, I think the few more photos kind of lead into the finale whiskey of our night, which was picked on that day that the photos were taken, I believe. Right, Ollie?
Yeah, so for me, the first thing, 2 things you notice when you walk into the distillery is obviously the scents, the smells, the aromas coming off. You mentioned earlier on you take your samples home. Actually, we had a bit of a tasting panel. I got everyone to taste their whiskey outside of the distillery, because that was the only way we were going to pick which cask we wanted to take home.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed is there was no 20-litre casks. Every other sort of most Aussie distilleries I walk into, there's these small format casks. You've just got these walls of 200-litre plus casks, and yeah, most of it is either Heaven Hill or beautiful PX, or other wonderful sort of casks that you've obviously put a lot of time and effort as we've talked in, and that's come through. But yeah, you've been around since April. You've got 5 or 6 unique whiskies that have come out, and we're all enjoying it here. Like, can you give us a break before, because it's just, what,
Give the other guys a chance.
mate, there's such, seriously, like, honestly, it doesn't matter which distillery you go to, like the magic of visiting a distillery is awesome, but then you walk into Amber Lane and seeing, a big fat still like Springbank, again, one of my favorite distilleries. So I noticed the lovely copper there, and then these walls of beautiful barrels. This is the other half of Amber Lane, Phil. So you got Rod and Phil. He's in charge of making sure those barrels don't leak, and he was basically jumping in and going, these are the whiskies that we've come to try today, and you can get a little bit of a hint of color there. Hopefully you can see there's the money shot there, which I'll zoom in on the whiskey, and that's
what a model.
That's the next whiskey. Well, when you get to pick your own cask, you come in for the whole hands-on experience. Justin, you know all about this, mate. There's something magical about it. So if you ever get a chance to bottle your own whiskey, even if it's a handful in the day at different distilleries, sometimes they offer it. It's a great experience. And then having someone like Rod with going through and walking through the different casks and even the process. I think he poured out a whiskey that was 4 weeks old or 6 weeks old, and the color, like we just tried the new make, it was like pitch black already in 4 or 5 weeks old, and we're just like the transformation that happens immediately over time when you have a good quality cask. And this is the investment that you've put into your distillery that I wanted to highlight, is you're not making any shortcuts. You're not rushing out to market with 2-year-old whiskey. These are all 3-4-year-old whiskeys that we're trying today. So wonderful experience, but I might hand it back to Emma and Rod to talk us through the last whiskey.
Yeah, so the last one, the Whiskey List PX cask pick. As you saw, some incredible modeling and photos from the day it was selected. And this is, again, Fernando de Castilla PX.
Yeah.
Sherry, want to tell us a bit more about it, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's just got the most incredibly dark color, as you'll see there. So it's actually had 2 lives, and I guess you would be disappointed with me if I was to say that it had only been in 1 barrel. So this one actually started its life in a 300-litre ex-McWilliams Apera cask, and we then moved it across. So this detail is on the back of the label for those who are buying a bottle. So it says initially aged in a 300-litre ex-Apera cask McWilliams before finishing in a 250-litre ex-PX cask from Fernando de Castilla. So it's 3 years and 1 month in total, non-chill filtered. This is as full-on a whiskey as you will ever have, absolutely brimming with flavour. The nose is to die for. I think of dark chocolate coated raisins, it comes to mind. But some of the tasting notes I've produced for the label include a rich raisin and demerara sugar nose brimming with spice. Taste is complex with dried apricots, almonds, cherry cola, red licorice, cinnamon, pepper, tobacco, toffee, and barley sugar. A long, rich and spicy finish. So it's quite a peppery dram. It's a bit like the equivalent of having a pepper steak. It's just so much lovely, rich PX-ness about it. It responds very well to water, but for those that love their cask strength whiskey, they'll enjoy it neat as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, quite a few of the comments were making fun of Ollie's very light pour in his glass from those photos. Quite hefty and generous. And the spirit thieves you guys have. Quite a few comments about the spirit thieves.
Can I say that spirit thief was the first thing that I bought when I decided to set up a distillery. I ordered for myself for Christmas. I've got the photo somewhere standing next to the Christmas tree. I actually imported that and a slightly smaller one from Kentucky. So it's a copper spirit thief from Kentucky. And then over time, we found we couldn't actually access the casks with that straight style of spirit thief. So that's why we have the stainless steel ones that are more of an arc shape to access the casks while they're in situ. But yeah.
Yeah, very cool, very nice. I find spirit thieves are so like one of those things in the distillery that like, yeah, you know, it's just basic equipment and it's obviously very simple physics, but distillers get really attached to their spirit thief. You know, they have their favorite one at the distillery. It's very fun. It's very cute. Barrel Brothers saying, you know, Rod, stop it. We can't pick a favorite. Lovely nose, coffee on the finish. I love that.
Yes,
like
I'd agree with that.
Coffee beans and the cola nut. So like obviously Coca-Cola we all know, but like the nut that you make cola from, it's got that like lovely earthy sugaryness to it. Apparently Nico's getting cherry ripe on it. David definitely getting that like Madeira sugar palette with a lightly peppery finish. Robin and Kirsten have already ordered a bottle. I love that. But yes, obviously we're very, very excited to have this bottling out there. You know, we love having you at all of our whiskey shows, and we love working with you guys. And you know, we're so excited. I know I am absolutely watching every step you make, and I'm so excited to see, you know, the barrels, the casking, everything you guys are doing with your whiskey. And I mean, like Ollie said, you know, you've hit the ground running with so many incredible expressions, you know, in the market, and something for everyone, which is great to see. Love Paul Thompson's comment here as well, a rum lover's whiskey. I think that's such a good call, because you know, we got to bring the rum people over to our side. You know, we got to bring them to the dark side, get them on the good stuff. But yeah, no, Leo's saying it's magnificent. Couldn't choose a favorite. But yeah,
Emma, I might launch the poll. So we're doing a multiple choice, but limit it to your top 1 and 2 favorite whiskies of tonight, please, when voting. I mentioned it earlier in the comments, so all the whiskies we're trying tonight are available to buy. I've just run out of time, so apologies on me. I will send it out an email tomorrow morning with the link to the tasting and all the rest of the Amber Lane range. If you've already bought tonight's special, the link that I've just posted up there, it's we've got it available. But yeah, basically, if you grab that bottle, and then tomorrow if you want to grab any other Amber Lanes, no doubt you'll hit the free shipping threshold, and we'll refund you that $15 difference. So we'll handle that on our side. So just a bit of timing, too many things at once today, but I'll send you the link to all the other whiskies available to buy tomorrow. Otherwise, yeah, this whiskey, I think just had a quick look, about 70% of those 100 bottles have sold out, Rod. So they went live at 6 p.m. today, so they're going quickly. So if you do want one, go grab, secure it. I love this whiskey for the simple fact that you can just sit down, pour yourself a giant dram. 20 mils is definitely not enough. You know, and just like whether it's by the fireplace, I like a campfire. If you get a great camping dram, cheese platter, whatever it is, and just like sit and enjoy. Like pick your favorite glass, chuck in an ice cube, a big round ball or something like that, and just enjoy it. You know, you got some whiskeys that are a 30-year-old Lefroy where you just want to sip on it and take your time. But this, on the other hand, I feel like it's big, it's moorish, it's dark, it's chewy. I'm loving all these tasting notes. And yeah, for me, it's just, I like to take a big sip, enjoy the mouthfeel that we mentioned before at the beginning, that I think has come through from the new make across all the whiskies we've tried tonight. Those toffee notes, figs has been mentioned a dozen times, butterscotch, I think is the most common tasting note of the night. This has got it, but I feel like a little bit on steroids as well. And yeah, natural cask strength. Rod, thank you from myself, Chris, and the entire Whiskey List team. Emma will get you there in the distillery, but mate, thank you for partnering us and letting us bottle one of your first exclusive whiskies and at cask strength as well. And we look forward to many more in the future, mate.
Thank you so much, Ollie. Well, as I was saying at the start, I've really enjoyed working with the Whiskey List crew. they're all lovely people, and their first love is whiskey, above all other things, and it drives everything they do. And there's a beautiful vibe at all of the whiskey show events that you guys put on. So we've done Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra. Unfortunately, I can't get up to Brisbane this weekend because I'm heading overseas, but we do have Edward manning the stall for Amber Lane this weekend. So for those of you who are in Brisbane, we'll have Silk Road. We've got another one of our expressions, number one, Sherry Lane and Destiny, available for pouring there. And of course, well, it sounds like there may be no more of the PX cask available, Oliver, from what you're saying. Sounds like they'll be sold out before the weekend. But anyway, I imagine there might be a few bottles of that floating around as well. But we're very excited about next year, and we'll be at all the Whisky List events next year. I look forward to meeting you all there.
You got a few more minutes, Rod. There's a dozen questions I think popping through the chat.
There are some great questions. And I will say as well, next time I won't let Ollie take such a big sample, because we could have gotten another bloody bottle out of that cask if it weren't for his heavy-handedness, I'm sure. So some great questions. Sally's asking, do you guys have plans for age statement whiskey in the future?
Yeah, we do. Absolutely. And it's just a matter of having our spirit a bit older. But I'd say within a year or two, we'll start putting, on most of our labels, we do say exactly how old they are. So this one, on the back, you'll see it tells you exactly how old it is, age 3 years and 1 month. Right? So we're even more specific than just the year. We've given the year and the month. And often we say on our labels the date that it was distilled, the date that the barrel was filled. So this one was filled initially on the 28th of July, 2019. So all of that details on the labels. But yes, we may be ambitious for Central Coast New South Wales, but we are hoping to mature our whiskey to at least 10 years of age. We have been toying with the idea of setting up a warehouse on the south coast of New South Wales at Huskiston. I have a property in that area, and so it would provide the sort of conditions for longer maturation. It's just a big effort to be shifting spirit 4 hours south of the main operations. So whether we do that or not, I don't know, but we definitely want to get to 10 years if we can.
Yeah, cool. Awesome.
Rod, I'm a huge fan of port casks. I can see Mike is as well. Are there any port casks on the horizon?
Well, here's the thing. It's pretty much every Australian distillery does port cask. And I guess, yes. So the simple answer is yes, we will do them. It'll be a finish. So it'll be something that's aged in bourbon cask for 3 years and finished for perhaps 9 months in a port cask. We're wanting to partner up with some of the wineries in the Hunter Valley, because there's that sort of regionality for us. We're about 45 minutes drive or 30 minutes drive from the Hunter Valley where we are. So we're hoping to nab a few nice port casks. Will they be coming out next year? I'm not sure. There are other things that are occupying my attention at the moment. Probably the sort of Silk Road concept. The other thing to say is that I love the first whiskey that I fell in love with was Glenfarclas. And Glenfarclas whiskey is a blend of PX and Oloroso casks. So what I will be aiming to do in the next 12 months is to put out my version of a 105. For those that know their Glenfarclas, I want to put out a 105 with the PX and Oloroso sherry bomb. Yes, we'll do a port cask eventually. But I think others are doing it so well. For those who have a sharp eye, they'll see I've got a couple of Overeem port casks on my shelves behind me here. I think they do an excellent job with their port cask whiskies. I would be frightened to have to try to compare myself with them, to be honest. But ultimately, we'll give it a go.
Yeah, fantastic. Awesome. I will say that the Glenfarclas 105 comment, Tom, David and I are in agreement. Yes, please. The 105 is one of my favorite Glenfarclas expressions. Yeah, I think, Ollie, have we shared the poll results?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I will in a minute. Quick question, Rod. Are you ever going to do a peated whiskey?
Well, I was thinking about that the other day. Look, before I go down that path, I want to spend some time in Islay. I've been saying to one of my good friends, Dominic, that I'd like to pay for him and I to spend a week in Islay. I love peated whiskey. I'm just not sure that I can produce to the standard that I would like to as a peated style. Yeah, I mean, as I say, I love peated whiskey. I'm a member of the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, and some of my favourite bottlings that they put out are from Bemore, and I love Lecheg, Tobermory, Carlilla is another of my favourites. So I love peated whiskey, but I suppose I'm one of these people that likes to focus on what I'm doing and do one thing really well. And once I'm satisfied that I've absolutely nailed that, then I might move on to something else. So I'm only 52. I've got time on my side. And in a few years' time, I expect I probably will say yes to that question, but not at the moment.
Rod, the easy shortcut is I'm a big fan of like you got Ximenez as well. You got Tobermory, Lecheg. You've got Bunnahabhain and their peated version Moyne. You've got Edredor and Bellich, and a couple Aussie distilleries have started doing a blend of their whiskey with a peated whiskey as a bit of a shortcut, and I think they just picked up a gold medal for it. Congrats on your silver medals as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
that's a big win. Less than 6 months out the door, and you've got medals on your belt already as well. So
thank you.
But yeah, there's so much opportunity and innovation under the legislation. Being a lawyer there of what can be Australian whiskey, I know you're playing around with the traditions of Scotch, but at the same time you're pushing the boundaries of what can be Aussie whiskey. I hinted before, your Virgin Oak remind me of a Cavalan again. Massive distillery in terms of the new age versus the old style of traditional stuff. So mate, I'm looking for what's on the horizon, but yeah, I'd be keen on a sweet and peat. The smokiness and sweetness of a PX. I don't know. That's my palate go to at the moment.
Yep. Well, certainly, I mean, I try not to drink whiskey every day. I think it's good for us to take a few days off every now and again, but some days are definitely peated days. So it would be nice one day to pour a peated Amber Lane for sure.
Yeah, fantastic.
There's one question about, am I doing any more of the ex-rye?
Mm-hmm.
So we did a very small release of an ex-rye cask, and that was it. That was sent to, the barrel was actually sent to us by mistake. It was meant to be a bourbon cask. We got the rye cask. Phil and I looked at each other and thought, let's just fill it and see what happens. So it's got quite a different flavor profile, which is more, I described as white chocolate, macadamias, and ginger. It's quite yummy. So we might get a few more of those for sure. I recently tried the rye cask expression from Heaven Hill, and it was very nice. So I'd like to stick with my Heaven Hills if I can. So if I can get a few rye casks, I will.
Yeah, cool. Fantastic.
Great.
I love to see that you're like experimenting but not jumping headfirst into anything. That always gives me like reassurance as a drinker, that it's not like, well, someone said we should make this, so now we make it. So I'll be really excited to kind of see how that goes. And yeah, everyone seems to be excited about it. The concept of a peated port, Amber Lane, and I'm not gonna lie, I will be as well. But yeah, I think in the poll, share the results. It really feels like one of those, as the tasting went on, the whiskies people loved more and more. So it's really, really great to see. Obviously, the Barrel Brother podcast is going to review them all for research. It's very important work, I'm sure. And for anyone based in Brisbane coming to the Brisbane show this weekend, we obviously the #1 Sherry Lane, which is actually one of my favorite expressions. I've got a bottle somewhere on the shelf here. It's just far behind me. So definitely try that if you're coming to the Brisbane show this weekend. But yeah, I just want to thank Rod for such an amazing tasting. I know we've gone a little bit over time, but it's so great to hear from you and to really deep dive into your brand, which has so much going already, despite, you know, being relatively new. And I absolutely cannot wait to see what, I mean, even the rest of the year brings for you guys. I'm sure you've got plans for the rest of the year outside of your trip.
Thank you.
Have a great time on your trip as well.
I will. I know there's been a lot of, you know, air quotes going on. Research trip, right? Yeah, I'll have fun. I'll have fun. But hey, I'm doing what I love to do, so I'm lucky that that my work is also something that brings me great joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for coming along and joining. Thank you so much for all your tasting notes and feedback. It's been an absolutely wonderful time. Rod, if you wanted to stick around a little bit for a debrief with Ollie and I, but yeah, thank you so much everyone, and we'll see you all at the next tasting. Bye.
Thanks everyone.